It's Saturday Night Livestream with your host, Amy Sousa, with special guests, Barry Wall and Brandon Showalter, featuring Jeannette and Donna, with musical guest Vanessa Vokey.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this first ever Saturday Night live stream event. We are all gathered here today to talk with you all and to celebrate, and also to promote the Partners for Ethical Care big event. It's bigger than Texas, coming up in April, on April the 20th in Austin, Texas. So this is a way for us to meet some of the speakers who are going to be on the panel in Texas. It's a way for us to get to know you all better. And it is absolutely a way for us to fundraise for that event. I'm going to take this opportunity right now to introduce our guests. So Barry Wall is an educator of over 30 years experience. He crosses all sectors. He is also the creator and key teacher of the Winning Mindset Creative Warrior Teachers Program, which helps others to find their voice and a path through the bizarre culture wars that we find ourselves embroiled in. He is an avid film watcher and a lover of good food, which he says that he eats too much. We don't know. We can't be sure. I'm going to give Barry a little promo right now of his work so that we can see a little clip from him, and bear with me as I add this to our live stream. Oops, hold on. And we're going to share this right here. And if I can get to it.
No sound.
Yeah. So how about this? How about we just ask Barry himself? Barry, go ahead and introduce yourself, plug yourself. And tell us a little
talk
bit
about me. Talk about me while I'm wittering away on there.
Yes,
it's great to be here, first and foremost. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be able to come and talk to everybody. I've been involved in this strangest of all battles now for a number of years now. And Alix, as you're well aware, because you and I were foundational in the thinking of the Warrior Teacher Program, the Winning Mindset, which is something that's now been running for almost a year. Can you believe it's that long? And so that we've got a number of people that are on it currently, which is designed to give people a voice. And that's exactly what Amy said, and it's exactly right. It's important to me that we defeat this in all its forms. So I think that's probably my key message to everyone, is that we don't negotiate with these people. That's where I'm at now. It takes a while to get there.
Absolutely.
But, you know.
This is a link to the YouTube of Barry's, and we are going to put up in a little bit if maybe Jay can find it for us, a link to his Substack as well. We'll put that up in one moment. Also, I want to introduce Brandon Showalter, who is a journalist with the Christian Post, who has reported extensively on the global developments of the gender identity movement and transgender ideology. He is the co-producer of the Christian Post documentary-style investigative podcast series, Generation Indoctrination: Inside the Transgender Battle. It was amazing. Please, everyone, go out and watch it. I have some appearances that I make in that, so I am very partial to it. It was a great coverage of this topic, and it has been featured in several. Brandon has also been featured in several documentary films, including the Heartbroken Productions Dead Name and the Tucker Carlson original documentary Transgressive: The Cult of Confusion on Fox Nation. He earned a BA in International Studies and Spanish from Bridgewater College of Virginia in 2007 and a master's degree in human rights from the Catholic University of America in 2022. Just happened. Bravo. He is a fellow at the John Jay Institute for Faith, Society, and Law. And we are going to go ahead and watch a clip. A trailer from the film Dead Name just now, if you will bear with me.
Make sure we've got some audio.
Oh, did my audio not work before?
No. Let's see if you can just click on the option to share with audio.
Okay, hold on. Okay, let me see if this is. Okay, so we're looking at this, and let me just make sure it's going to share with audio.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear that?
Nope, no audio.
No sound.
Oh, darn it. That's a bummer. Hold on. Sound preferences. I'll put. There we go. Wait, hold on.
While everybody's waiting, that's a boy you're seeing who's all of 5 or 6 years old.
Okay, hold on.
5, maybe 6. I don't know.
I'm intrigued, Brandon. Did you see my piece about the Stonewall trans toddler?
I didn't. You should see this film and write about it.
Yeah, I think I should do. You know Diane Ehrenshaft?
Oh, crazy.
Okay, we're gonna try this. We're gonna try this.
Parts.
Here we go.
You don't have them. You can do special surgery where they turn your penis inside out and there's a vagina inside.
Preschool sends out a letter to all the parents announcing one of our students is now Rosa, and we would love you all to come and celebrate and support her. And he was 4 years old. I didn't even know if he knew what a pronoun was. I go to the daycare a week later to drop him off, and it's Rosa is written on the entrance sheet where I have to sign. Rosa's on his cubby. It's everywhere. And they would just look at me and listen. They would say, Helen, you should really learn to accept this and celebrate it. And I'm like, celebrate what? Celebrate that my child's going to be put on hormones and his penis will never grow and he'll never have a normal sex life and be on drugs for the rest of his life?
This was when she was like 15. I remember being up in her room and she said, I'm trans and I need a new name. Somehow I got a text from CVS. Your prescription for TES is available. She's like, it's mine. You can't take it from me. You can get this by making a phone call and having a tele appointment. I mean, there was no psychological evaluation. There was nothing. Where does our species go if you can cut off your body parts like this?
Sean had set up an appointment with an endocrinologist at the hospital to try to get hormones. I'm looking at it as, hey, this kid just needs to explain to him, hey, he's had a lot of traumatic events through his life, losing his leg. We had an older son that died of a heroin overdose when he was 8 years old. He went through the loss of his mom, being diagnosed with cancer. I mean, I went through I said, all these things have to have a big effect on him. When I had the appointment with the psychiatrist, I was just blown away when she turned around and told me that he's definitely transgender, and you are an unsupportive, abusive father. I'm trying to keep him alive.
Yeah. So powerful.
Extremely compelling.
Yeah, it's very. I'll just say very quickly before, I don't want to interrupt your flow, Amy, but it profiles 3 families that have been ripped apart by gender ideology, and it's kind of an intimate portrait glimpse into what it's really like, kind of a fly on the wall. Partners for Ethical Care did a review on the blog about how they called it a fly on the wall, perspective of what it's like for families when their children suddenly start identifying as trans and head down a pathway of unchecked medicalization. Everything I've heard thus far from people who have watched it said it was just made their jaws hit the floor. And the suffering that these families go through is just otherworldly.
Friends, I'm so sorry. Oh, good. I lost the screen that had this in it. I'm so sorry. I lost it for a minute. Now I found you. Okay, I was looking for all of you in my windows, but I had too many windows open because I have so many things that we're going to talk about today, and too many things open. Thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing that, and I'm really excited for that documentary to come out.
Well, I see Yvette is asking, where can we watch Dead Name? You can rent or buy it at vimeo.com. If you do Dead Name, 2 words, Broken Hearted Films is the company, and it's very much worth. People complain, it's like, oh, why is it behind a paywall? It's like 2 lattes and you watch it. So, just do it. Just take the plunge. Independent filmmakers are filling a very critical truth-telling void that's been left at a legacy press, and they're getting the truth out there about this. So watch it. It's really good.
Absolutely. And I also, of course, want to introduce the amazing Ms. Alix Aharon, who is one of the members and founders of Partners for Ethical Care, who is hosting us this evening. She is also the creator behind the Gender Mapper Project, which is documenting all of the gender clinics that are springing up. She has documented that there were roughly 10 about 5-10 years ago, and now we have in this country over 300 that we have seen. Her map includes clinics that are working on children, including those that give them drugs and surgeries to minors. So this is an incredible project, and we are so thankful to have her here. We are also thankful for her amazing YouTube and research. She has researched the link behind Big Pharma, its connections to big tech, their connection to NGOs, and that pipeline to get this propaganda inside the schools. She also does amazing research on the connection between the gender agenda and the porn industry that we are all so thankful for. So I encourage everyone to follow her on Twitter, follow her YouTube, and please check out her amazing research. I often use it myself when I am doing my own analysis. So it has been instrumental in helping me develop some of my own opinions on this topic. Today, we are going to be speaking with you all on the topic of Drag Queen Story Hour. We know that this has become an increasing problem. This is not the screen I wanted to share. I want to share a screen with you just showing some of, this is showing, we can all see it together. There are just so many of these events. It has become such a huge problem. We know a lot of people are protesting these events. There are Antifa counter protesting these events. There was one just in Canada today. Redux News covered it, that was protested, and they were actually attacked by Antifa counter protesters. But we are seeing what is happening to our kids, where they are being desensitized and groomed by men who are hypersexualizing themselves. We know that drag is associated with drugs. It is associated with sexual promiscuity. It used to be an event only for adults in nighttime clubs, and for some reason we have taken it into the daytime with our kids. This, I am showing you a screen right now. This was covered on Fox News, which was crazy because usually they are a little more critical of these, but I thought it was really interesting to note the name of this. This particular event was hosted at the Please Touch Me Museum. I think that is so gross and ironic that this was at the Please Touch Me Museum. And in the bio, it says that this was a safe place for Ian Morris. He was the drag queen in question, a safe place for him to be himself. So what we are seeing right now is a massive movement in which kids are being used as emotional support animals for adult men to perform their fetishes in public. Why does Ian need a safe place that includes kids? That's just insane to me at a Please Touch Me museum. And that we do have pictures. I didn't show those ones, but there are many pictures of kids rollicking on the floor with these men. You know, a lot of women are calling this woman face, but I want to open it up to our wonderful guests to share their wisdom and insights on this.
So I'd really love it if we could actually start with Barry, because he has a really interesting analysis about drag, and he's kind of covered this a little bit on his channel. So I'd really love to hear, Barry, your kind of intro into this, because I think that that's really, really important for people to understand exactly what we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you, Alix, for that. Yes, I suppose the first thing I'd like to say is it's complicated, right? We want it to be simple, but it's not, and there's a number of reasons why it's not. And Alix has already watched one of my videos today, I believe, where I've taken some people through, or taken everybody who's seen it through, my take on this particular phenomena. And I think the first thing to mention that really helps us to begin to categorize what exactly is going on is that there is a huge difference between American drag and British drag. That's the first thing. Now, British drag is steeped in centuries of history, and also in a type of illegality about homosexuality that I don't think ever existed across the States in the way that it did in the UK. So there was a drive to move gay men into, keep them in the shadows, because because imprisonment and social destruction was what followed being revealed as a gay person. So we went and hid in the theatricals. That's what we did. We hid. And we did that for years and years and years. And eventually, over time, the camp man became a staple of British television, along with drag. American drag has a different history to it altogether, and often different reasons why it was taking place. In British drag, it was usually a means to an end. Because we've got a lot of American viewers, they may not be familiar with the Carry On films or anything like that, which were very quaint British comedies, in which often the people would dress up in drag in order to rob somewhere or to infiltrate somewhere. It had nothing to do with being sexual at all. It was usually a means to an end. When in America, if we look at drag in America in culture generally, and it would be Tootsie and Mrs. Doubtfire and all this type of thing. And that was always done for a profoundly heterosexual reason, usually so you could get the girl or so that you could see your family, in the case of Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire. And like everybody else, the idea of drag has been used for comedic effect in films forever. So it gets even more complicated then, because unfortunately what you've got appearing in the sort of historic nature of drag of both Britain and America is queer theory and gender ideology, which inserts itself under that. And it then becomes something different altogether. And that something different is what's called queer performativity. And I think it's really important that we start to call it what it is. It's called queer performativity. And when you think about how this movement, which is, if you will, a template that places itself over everything, be that a university, a business, any institution of any kind, and then destroys that institution from the inside out, it parasitizes everything. It piggybacks on everything. It force teams itself, a la the Denton's document in the UK, with other organizations and movements in order to give itself any kind of credibility. And in doing so, it changes the original form, but retains the original title. Now, I've got friends who are drag queens, and I used to do drag years ago to raise money for the Macmillan cancer charities. But I'd stand on the stage and do, family fortunes. Do you have that in America? I think you do have family fortunes, where they ask you how many people said, because I always remember that wonderful answer that chat when they asked him, name a girl with a long neck, and he said name a bird with a long neck, and he said Naomi Campbell, which I thought was marvelous. So there's, you know, so it's always been this kind of theatrical sort of idea of it. Queer performativity is a different thing altogether. Queer performativity is about perverting anything that is perceived by people who are followers of queer theory as that which is heteronormative. Now, what they mean by heteronormative is anything they decide it is, right? They won't give you just one definition, but basically it's anti-family, right? It's anti-family, it's anti-2.2, it's anti-anything that smacks of being what we would have seen for many, many years as being normative, right? Which is not normal, but normative, which means there's more of it than anything else, right? So it's not saying that gay people are abnormal and straight people are normal. It's saying that it's normative because there's more of it. Well, they then add the word hetero on the front of it, and heteronormative for them is anything that they choose. It's a vessel. It's actually kind of linguistic vessel. It's where they can put words into it to decide what it is and then say we're against that, which is why when they go into schools, and this is actually true of both the American experience and the British experience of queer performativity, is that they will take what we would see as really important mythological stories, such as Little Red Riding Hood, and that story would then undergo queering, which would mean that grandma would become the bad guy and the wolf would become the good guy. Now that's undermining fundamental archetypes, these stories that have been put together through generations of parenting. That is a profound attack on raising children safely to live in society. So it's queer performativity that gets up my nose. My mate, who's a drag queen, when I said to him, "Oh, you're now part of the umbrella," he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You're now part of the umbrella. You're trans now." He said, "Don't be ridiculous." He said, "They might as well say milkman. It's a bloody job." You know, he tells jokes and does quizzes in pubs every week. It would never occur to him to go in front of a bunch of children. You know, I think somebody asked the question, and I think it's a very good question. Don't ask, you know, why your children want to watch a drag queen. Ask why your drag queen want to be in front of children. So I think we have to be quite clear about the fact that what we're seeing is queer performativity.
Yeah, and
Because
also, you know, something that you've mentioned quite a lot of times in your work is the concept of basically inversion, right? So, you know, to queer something is essentially to invert it and turn it upside down. So therefore, in Red Riding Hood, the baddie is the grandma and the goodie is the wolf, right? So everything is just completely inverted. I have a question for you then. What do you think prompted this movement in 2014 to take drag from being, you know, something in the pub, something in the nightclubs, to something that people thought was acceptable for children? What do you think prompted that whole kind of movement? Because it feels like it happened overnight. Well,
I think we've got to remember that the movement for queer theory and gender ideology, and in fact everything that comes from what I call the postmodern teach, you can add critical race theory to that. So all those three movements that come under the banner of postmodernism have been marching through the institution since the 1960s. Now, if you want to do gender ideology, you can go right back further than that to people like John Money and Kinsey and Norman Spack and de Chegley, who was one of the founders of Mermaids, and then Norman Spack, who trained the Susie Green who ran Mermaids in the UK. So you can go right back to that. When it comes to 2014, the reason I think there's a resonance around that is that firstly, over here in the UK, Stonewall had done their job. At that point, we had equal marriage. I mean, we were equal. It was Douglas Murray puts it so well. It was like the train had arrived at the station. And now we seem to have just gone, right, not stopping, keeping going. And the train's just pummeled past where it was supposed to be. And what Stonewall should have honestly done at that point was to go, that's it, we're done, we're closing. But they didn't. They went, where can we get the next bit of money from? And sadly, they employed a queer theorist who took over the organization and thus began this nonsense. Now, it's like it was gathering momentum, and then there seemed to be a point where it broke, and it was like, I've never seen this before. Now I can't see it. I can't look anywhere without seeing it. Suddenly the rainbow was everywhere. This chevron was everywhere. Suddenly everybody was talking about this. It's been a long time coming. And I think we reached a point generationally where the first generation of acolytes, if you will. So if you go back to the 1980s, the original high priestess and her cohorts would be Judith Butler and Gail Rubin and Pat Khalifa, who first came up with the concept.
We love them.
Sorry?
I said our favorite people. Judith
Our
Butler.
favorite people, you know, who came up with the idea of queer theory back in the 1980s in San Francisco, which is where the umbrella came from. Well, by the time they'd gone through the institutions and taken over just about every discipline, but starting with women's studies, which became gender studies, and then from gender studies, it went straight for the teachers and the English literature departments, and then sociology, and then the theatricals, geography, you know, and so on, is that we reached a critical mass point where the people that had been trained by these universities that have been doing this for years and getting away with it were now old enough to start teaching.
Yeah,
so they began to bring it into our institutions. They either went into teaching or they went into HR.
HR, exactly.
So,
it's so phenomenal that you're saying that, because it's absolutely fascinating the number of, especially women, who have been indoctrinated in college into this utter bullshit, and then they go out into the corporate world and they wreak utter havoc. You know, they're completely indoctrinated into equity, diversity, inclusion, and they're pushing absolute nonsense to people, to, you know, proper, regular people, software engineers, talking to them about queering things. They're like, how can I queer my software? You know, how can I queer my code? And I think that it really does come from, unfortunately, millennial women in many cases who have been trained in queer theory through the university system. And I noticed that quite a lot, that a lot of the people who are organizing it happen to be women in their kind of, you know, 30s to 40s. I think that was actually the first one that was in the UK, was from a woman who had seen it in San Francisco and brought it over. And then overnight, there was like 50 of these drag queen story hours. And I just couldn't figure it out. I was so bamboozled, to be honest, because drag was something for the clubs. Was always something incredibly raunchy as well. I mean, you know, the whole concept of a drag queen is that they're over sexualized, they're saying all this crazy stuff. And in the club situation, that might work, but I simply can't fathom how it transfers into the classroom.
Well, I think what you're talking about there is an example of forced teaming. So what you've got is a group of people who have attached themselves and said, look, you know, we're like the gay movement. You know, I remember all those drag queens that used to come and teach me as a kid. No, well, of course they didn't. Right. OK, so it's this idea that they've attached themselves to the gay movement and said, we're just like the gay movement. Don't oppress us. And when you put that together with what I think has been caused by, A, we've got too much time on our hands, and B, social media, we have an enormous amount of people who are suffering from what I like to call narcissistic compassion. Now, Jordan Peterson has spoken about this, and it's been going around for a while, and I think he's absolutely right. It's a phenomenally dangerous force. And it's the same sort of thing as often you would have seen in the past, where somebody would have, you know, been doing something for children in Africa, but in a way that meant they didn't inconvenience them too much. It's that kind of, I'm a good person, that virtue signaling, and often within the middle classes, because it is usually the middle classes that do this. The working classes haven't got time to do it, whereas the middle classes have. And because of the mistakes that we made with the gay movement and the way that gay people were treated in the 80s and the 90s, which to many people alive today is still a sore memory, that people don't want to be seen to be anything but kind. You know, and who the hell wants to be kind? Don't be kind, be effective. What's wrong with people? You know, it's this idea that it's the kind sickly, but there's an awful lot of stuff going on in the background that is driving the very thinking that Drag Queen Story Hour is a symptom of. And I think we have to recognize that this is a symptom. It's a symptom of a wider malaise. And if you take a look at the UNESCO goals for 2030, you can see where this is all coming from, where this idea of, you know, equity and everybody being treated as if they've got the right to do what the hell they want, and gender identity ideology, it's all sitting there ready to be read by people. And now that it's something that people can get behind, and the problem is they've got behind it without thinking. And in doing that, they've entrenched themselves into a position that if they come out of that position, it comes with a great personal cost, not only socially, but mentally and emotionally. Because if you're somebody who's invested themselves in this for the last 10 years, yeah, it was always all great and lovely, inclusive, and you will know, they know It's sitting there in the back of the mind. Hang on, there's something not quite right here. But they can't admit it because if they do, it will shatter their map of meaning. And that's why it's so hard to get people to understand, is because it's almost like a cult has gone mainstream. And the advent of social media and communication means that this is now able to happen at a speed that we've never seen before. And therefore it proliferates like a parasite, you know, and attaches itself to people.
I think
Sorry, Amy, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you know, there's a very effective sloganeering that is going on with all of these words, you know, kindness and inclusivity, and you know, just all of these are being used, but these are terms that are these are you know, values that we're acting like these are the highest values, and somehow these values are higher than other values like boundaries, integrity, truth. You know, these are other values, but there's this leveraging going on, where things like inclusivity are being used as a wedge against boundaries, or kindness is being used as a wedge against truth. So this sloganeering is becoming highly effective. And then, you know, I kind of want to, or I was going to pass it to Brandon maybe, because the documentary that you were just a part of, like, you can see that these terms, these values that are sloganeering are being used against small children who are swallowing them whole. They don't have enough experience in the world to be primed to reject cultural ideology that's being pushed at them, and instead they are internalizing it to the point that, you know, the young man you just showed is the young boy, not even young man, the young tiny child is talking about removing his own genitals.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, it is kind of, I think, overwhelming and jarring to see the breakdown of these basics. And particularly, I mean, I don't know that the little child at the beginning of the documentary was ever exposed to drag queens per se, but it's all part and parcel of this larger push within the culture to sow confusion into the minds of children. Because had you told me 10 years ago, drag queens are going to be shaking their butts and trying to read stories to children in public libraries, people would have sent you to the psychiatric ward. Nobody would have thought, it's like, what on earth? Like, this just sort of seemingly came out of nowhere. And while I've done a little bit of reporting on the phenomenon of Drag Queen Story Hour at the Christian Post, Christopher Rufo had a big deep dive, and I think it was City Journal of the Manhattan, that's the publication of the Manhattan Institute, about where this all came from and how it appeared on the scene. I think there was the money trails, if my memory serves correct, about this was not an organic movement. It just sort of seemed to spread like a virus, where even in places like, I think, Lafayette, Louisiana, you had people trying to read, you know, I mean, like places you would never expect, but the surrounding community is not in favor of it. You know, San Francisco, New York, okay, well, that you can maybe understand how that would come on the scene, but this is just, it just emerged out of nowhere. But yes, and I'll just note too, and Barry was touching on this a little bit ago, I've never been a fan of drag, just got to say. But the drag of yesterday, of decades gone by, was kind of silly and goofy. You know, Electra Lux, Hedda Lettuce, you know, funny, goofy names, and they were performing. It was kind of, okay, people can make the argument that it's woman face or misogynistic, but it was silly. You know, it was just kind of goofy, and people would laugh and play, you know, traffic in some tropes and some stereotypes. Okay. But it was, you know, to the extent that drag is lighthearted, it was lighthearted. Today, there are drag queens named Pentecost going in and talking in church services. Annie Christ is reading to, I think it was Philadelphia where that went down. I even saw a drag queen with the stage name Molestia Child. Yes, Molestia Child. That was the name of the drag. I think that was in Texas somewhere. And in Houston, I'm pretty sure it was a public library in Houston. People were, some of these more conservative people were raising alarm that there was no background checks for any of these people. And one of them was legitimately a sexual predator with an official record of offenses.
Yeah, many. I think Redux has uncovered.
I'm sure Redux is on the game. They probably tracked all of the cases because they do some of the best reporting on these things. But the Houston incident stands out because that was the first one I remember where a legitimate sex offender who had committed sex crimes against children was allowed to read stories to children. Oh, looky there. See, I'm not making it up. There's a drag queen by the name of Molestia Child. I mean, it's just so, I mean, when people raise the alarm about these kinds of things, they are often, you know, the thing that gets hurled at a lot of more conservative leaning Christian types is, oh, the slippery slope is a fallacy. And I'm like, how much more evidence do you need when you have a drag queen named Molestia Child and you have sexual predators allowed into libraries to read stories to children? And a library historically has been seen where, I mean, the American Library Association is probably one of the wokest organizations out there. But, you know, a library was, when I was a kid, I'm 37, it was a space where children cultivated a love for reading. And you spur on their imagination. You learn about really interesting things. You learn about geography. You learn about science. You learn about history. You know, you try to get kids to dive into good books and explore and learn how to process information and open their imaginations. Now, it's all this, you know, psychological conditioning to accept paraphilias. That's not even reading. Like, what is this even about? I mean, we have to ask these kinds of questions, and it's not fear-mongering, and it's not slippery sloperism to wonder that something is amiss here. And again, when it is as, you know, when the stage names are as sexualized and as gross as they are, how that doesn't send off red flags in people's minds just maybe shows how numb and degraded we've become. But I just think this is it's a much more dangerous phenomenon than we realize. And it is just yet another tool in the tool belt of gender identity activists to sow confusion into the minds of children who are getting boatloads of propaganda through comprehensive sexuality education in the schools, social emotional learning, which sort of breaks down their cognitive faculties to make them accept absurdities like some women can have penises. It's just yet another thing. And school assemblies, like we've now seen, Twitter has opened up our eyes to see, you know, drag queens prancing around on stages in fishnet stockings, like spread eagle. Like, what's going on? I mean, there's a there when you see it in the sort of panoply of forces that are trying to confuse children about the most basics of their bodies at the precise time when their cognitive faculties are developing those reality testing skills.
It is so insane. I was, you know, Alix, I was going to ask you because, you know, I know that you've talked a little bit also about Desmond is Amazing, who was the first so-called drag kid who has been pictured with known killers, has been pictured mimicking and doing drugs. So he knows about this. And now I saw Crocs is even putting something together where there is going to be a drag kid contest sponsored by Croc, you know, the shoe brand. So I know that you have documented, you know, the link between this, you know, Desmond has been featured stripping literally for adults for money in adult clubs. And I wonder if you can talk about, you know, I don't know, just extrapolate more on your research about this.
Don't forget the Rohypnol painting.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
thank you.
Let's first of all just examine exactly what we're talking about here for anybody who hasn't anybody who hasn't seen it. So this is Desmond the Amazing, the 11-year-old drag kid who is on Good Morning America. So very, very mainstream TV. You know, this isn't like, you know, late night streaming with, you know, Gavin. This is extremely mainstream.
Caffeine free. I can get on board with that.
My mom doesn't like me drinking caffeine.
Does it make you hyper? Yeah, me too. They don't like when I drink caffeine either. But Desmond, you're one of the youngest and first drag queen/kids. And I've heard that you've gotten messages from young adults who look up to you for being who you are. What are some of the notes you've gotten?
Some of the notes I've gotten are like that you inspire me very much, and I wish I could have had the support that you have.
when I was a child.
My blood pressure is through the roof.
Okay, so you know, first of all, what we have here is a major safeguarding concern. So what does he say straight at the bat? People are messaging him, right? That's not on, right? You don't ever have a situation where strangers from the outside can be messaging your child. Okay, it's absolutely insane that he's even admitting to receiving messages from anybody, adults, children, supportive, not supportive, right? You know, let's not forget that this is essentially, 75% of the world thinks this is absolutely horrific. So to put him on Good Morning America and expose him like this is this grotesque display of, you know, just like sacrificing this child. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. And by the way, my heart bleeds for Desmond, and I really, you know, I do support him. I think that it's terrible what's happening to him. He is clearly a victim. This is not me attacking Desmond. But we have to understand that a lot of the time, these movements kind of tell on themselves, right? They explain exactly what's happened. I'm getting messages. I'm the first ever drag kid, and I've inspired a whole bunch of others, right? Well, you have to kind of say this is extremely strange. This is not dressing up at home, putting on the dressing up box. This is mainstream TV. A young boy who is extremely sexualized, very, very sexualized. That's not dressing up like grandma. That's dressing up like a prostitute. And I think also a lot of this has to do with the fact that porn has completely saturated our culture. From, you know, the statistics now is that the age that young boys start watching pornography is 8 years old. Okay, so I don't actually know how it can get any lower. And we have to also kind of recognize the effect that pornography has on our culture. And I just want to mention just for a second, it's a bit of a hot topic, obviously, but, you know, the whole Andrew Tate thing, right? Andrew Tate is a pornographer, right? A mainstream pornographer, a pimp, who is, you know, managing women on OnlyFans. Like, this is disgusting behavior, right? This is truly horrible, predatory. And he is on Tucker Carlson, right? He's being interviewed by Piers Morgan. So there's a wider sense of grooming that's going on here. That's okay. Andrew Tate, for example, can say a couple of things that people like, you know, some kind of conservative talking points, and he'll get on a TV show. But we're talking about a pornographer and a pimp, right? So I just, you know, and I know Brandon has kind of mentioned a little bit of that as well. But you know, for me, when I see Desmond, I see the end result of a culture that has been completely and utterly, you know, grasped by wider pornography culture. Mm-hmm. And it makes me afraid for the children, and it makes me very, very concerned about how exactly are we even going to get out of this, right? You know,
yeah. I think I don't know about, you know, I saw that Andrew Tate was on Tucker, which was interesting because, Tucker has the guts of a burglar, and to his great credit, he made the transgressive documentary, and so I don't know what got into him to interview Andrew Tate, or if it was even exposed that he had been, I don't know, whatever. Because I certainly am no fan of Andrew Tate, but I wrote an article about the sexualized grooming of children that actually made an appearance in the Tucker documentary, where I touched on Desmond, just to bring it back to what we were talking about. There is this famous picture of him where he's pictured with those two killers that Amy mentioned in front of a painting that has Rohypnol, the date rape drug, on it. There's also the other drag kid Nevis from Canada. His stage name is Lactatia, which is just so disgusting. Have you heard about him? Lactatia is very like the Canadian version of Desmond, and he's been prominently showcased by Elle magazine, where he's prancing around in this little pink dress and blonde hair and this sort of the devious diva you can ever think of. And it's just like, what in the world is an 8-year-old child doing that? And he's performing at nightclubs, and been seen pictures of posing with men who are completely naked except for a very small covering over their genitals. And I once even saw him holding a balloon that read "Eat a Dick." And so, yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, you just see this stuff, and it's just, I stumble around for words because there he is right there posing very suggestively, and the sexualization of children is happening right before our eyes, and nobody's doing anything. I heard, and I read, I thought when he was, I think, performing at some club, or it might have been Desmond, that the Child Protective Services was inundated with calls, but because it's around this transgressive gender stuff, nothing happened. And I think the excuse was, if my memory is correct, that the parents gave permission and therefore it was somehow okay. Even though, dollar bills are being thrown at these children, and they're gyrating, and they're being clearly exploited by major media platforms and publications and corporations. Somehow this is just, you're not allowed to criticize it. I can't even, I hate even looking at these pictures, especially that one where he's like grasping himself sexually. Like, what's that even about? I mean, they're so dissociated. You can see it in their eyes that there's something really, really off. No, this is just
no.
Yeah.
I think you've raised a number of things, both Alix and Brandon, there that I think are worth unpicking. I think, Brandon, you're absolutely right about what the names used to be and what they are now.
Yeah.
Head of lettuce. But you can get behind that, can't you? It's harmless fun.
If you like it, okay. If you don't, all right, you can ignore it. It's just
you can ignore it. But I mean, it's
I
worth
won't be ignoring molesting a child. No,
absolutely. But, no, damn right. Who should? But it's back to this years ago. It was very much a pushback from gay men who'd been bullied and criticized for being feminine. It's like, you want feminine, have this. That's what it was about. Whereas that was a reaction. This isn't a reaction. This is an incursion. Right? And that's the difference between the two there. I think it's important thinking about. And secondly, you mentioned sloganeering, Amy. Do you remember when you said about sloganeering?
Yep.
And I think it's worth talking about that for a minute. And let's talk about how that's happened and why people fall for it. Because I have a theory about why that happens. And I think that the reason that happens is because we now live in a way that humans were never evolved to live, because the technology has overtaken us. And I think since the advent of social media, and particularly smartphones, most of us will have seen 40 images before we get to the toilet first thing in the morning. You pick up your phone and there they are in front of you. And then I think what begins then is a process. And that process is that you start to get notifications or look at what's happened overnight to your own social media, and you begin going, I'm not going to engage with that. I'm going to engage with that, but I'll do it later. I'm not going to engage with that. I'm going to engage with that, but I'll do it later. And that's a later that very, very rarely comes, which is why we've all got bookmarks and all sorts of nonsense that we can't find anything in, is because we never follow up on that promise to ourselves that we will engage with this stuff. Now, what that eventually means is that we as individuals are squeezed down into a very simplistic yes or no, high altitude, low resolution summation of what it is that we're seeing. In which case, if something comes along, be kind, right? If something comes along that makes us think, if I engage with that, it'll make me look better. We're not looking below the surface. We're not looking below the surface to see what's going on. So what we're doing is proliferating small amounts of emotional memetics, which is the memes and the communication that comes from it, that give us a little jolt of being I'm a virtuous person because I've retweeted that. But actually what we need to do is to stop and find moments of stillness, which is what, as Alix will well know, what I teach in my Warrior Teach program about how to do that and to get rid of that emotionality. Because what we have is a situation where people like myself and Brandon and both of you, we know this stuff, but we often find when we're talking to people that we go, and we try and give it to them all at once. Yeah. And it's almost impossible for them to understand it because they can't even see us because we are way beyond their horizon. So I think there's something to start. We need to start thinking about how do we encourage people not to do that squeezing down? And how do we encourage people to engage with stuff in a proper way, but also to recognize how slippery media is.
Yeah. Now, Alix, on that note, slippery sort of in the way that this is inserted into children's programming. Probably the biggest example is what I've seen is Blue's Clues. You talk about drag queens. They had a pride parade led by a drag queen. And remember, Blue's Clues is a children's cartoon show aimed. The target demographic is 3 to 5 year olds.
Yeah.
And they even had a baby beaver with mastectomy scars on that one of the pride floats. Kelly J. Keene was here in the United States, and she was the trigonometry podcast with Constantine and Francis. She was talking about, I showed my film crew guy the Blues. She was talking about Blues Clues, like the trans beaver, and he was like, "What?" It's like, "Is that real?" And then he looked it up on Snopes. Well, here's a fun little fact. I was actually with the two of them when that happened. So that was like a little moment of history witnessing there. But like if it's in Blues Clues and you got a beaver, which is slang for female genitalia, by the way, you've got mastectomy scars. I mean, if that doesn't show that this is part of a larger grooming effort, Blues Clues. I mean, it's right there.
I wanted to mention something about grooming as well, because I think that people, when they think of grooming, they think that there's going to be, some man with a single target.
Yeah.
But the thing about grooming is that grooming can be done, not just to kids, but to parents, to teachers, and to institutions, and to culture itself.
The whole society. Yes.
And it's all about trust development. It's about gaining access, privacy. It's about desensitization and normalization of this inappropriate behavior. It's about normalizing these boundary violations. Groomers, the people who are the groomers, they don't even necessarily do this behavior, even just to a kid or a group that they plan to target, but they do this behavior also in order to make kids more vulnerable to future predation from another. So a lot of these men who are doing this behavior, it's not even because they're like, that particular kid is my target, but it's just to normalize, desensitize, and make that kid more vulnerable to a future predator. Do
you think that's any different behavior than you would have seen in previous cultural revolutions, such as in China?
No,
it's very similar.
You know what? I just want to mention, before we go into kind of Barry and talking about the cultural revolution stuff, I want to also say something that's really important, is that the same people who are creating Blues Clues and Disney programs and everything, in the morning, they might be creating that. And in the evening, a lot of them are creating pornography, right? So we have to understand that this is a real thing. That a lot of the same people who are producing this, filming this, are showrunners, whatever, are also producing, hardcore pornographic content, because they need to make a living. I'm not going to shame somebody who's a lighting expert, right, on a porn set. I understand they just want to make money. So that's also something really, really important to kind of always remember, is that this is it's the same programming day and also night. And that's why kind of the media is completely out of control. But I'd love to hear Barry talk a little bit about the cultural aspects.
Well, and I wanted to say one thing as he goes into this, because I think it will be give a foundation, because I think a lot of what we all hear all the time from people is like, why do people fall into this? And one of the things that I always bring up, and I think, Barry, you also have a background in theater. I have a background in theater, and I always point to, like, what was the worst thing to Juliet in Romeo and Juliet? It was banishment. It wasn't death. It wasn't that Romeo was going to be killed. It was banishment. What was the worst thing in Oedipus? Oedipus, who broke every single social taboo, married his mother, killed his father. Did he get killed in the end? No, he was banished. So fear, we are in a situation where now, online is the public commons, our social networks are the public commons, and fear of banishment is just as severe a punishment to us now as it was to us thousands of years ago. That fear of banishment, being banished from the tribe, it's a very real punishment that gives people a lot of pause from speaking, even if they know it's true, even if they know what they're saying is wrong. And I think this segues probably very well into the Cultural Revolution.
I think that's a profound observation. And I think it's important to remember that the forces that I believe that are driving this are incredibly powerful, folks. There's a theory that I teach on the program called punctuated equilibrium, which is a biological theory, which is the concept that for 80% of the time, nothing happens. And 20% of the time, evolution goes absolutely crazy. So if you think 80 million years, nothing, 20 million years, all sorts of new species and all sorts of change. Well, I think we're now in a cultural and tech punctuated equilibrium. And I think we're in the 20%, and we'd better get used to it, because this is the status quo now. Right. And it's not, if you think about people my age, I mean, I've been on the internet 30 odd years. Well, that's extraordinary to most people to think that somebody's been on it that long, but I have, and I was there at the very beginning. And we have to understand that this knocked us sideways. We didn't see it coming. Nobody could have. We didn't understand what we had our hands on. And then you watch Star Trek and you see the guys going, beam me up, Scotty, and they want information. You know, Gene Roddenberry was a bloody genius. He could see what was coming. And I think we have to be aware of the fact that we've all been technologically sideswiped by this. And when I was on the internet for the first time, going back 20, 30 years ago, one of the things I said was we need to have media studies starting at very, very young age indeed. And everybody thought I was insane. Right? But I was right. I've been proved right. Because if you can, whatever the media is, if people are able to deconstruct it, it loses its cachet. That's the first thing I would say. And secondly, we also have to recall that what's happening now with certain people within each generation is that they are creating an avatar of themselves that I imagine takes up some 80% of their reality, which means that the 20% of who they are, which is the real them on the outside, will do everything it can to prevent the 80% that is playing online or is within the online space. And if you think about the online space as being the Wild West, and that in fact everything's up for grabs, and there's different tribes doing different things, and everything's bouncing around, and people don't understand one thing or another because everybody's often talking at cross purposes. We have a situation that's terribly scary to most people, and it makes them insular. Then add COVID into the mix, and this was the perfect storm for people to become tribal in a way that we never expected. Well, if you're somebody who's turned on by sniffing shoes, you can find any number of forums that will help you indulge your particular fantasy. Now, I don't care if that's your particular fantasy, as long as you're not doing it in the library. Okay, so there's something here about understanding what boundaries are, and also recognizing that just because that a subgroup now, which might have been 4 men that get together on a Friday 35 years ago, can now be 6,000 people in one room. Well, that doesn't make that subgroup any more valid. And I think that we have to be careful in what we're seeing is that people are spending too much energy in creating these identities, which, if you like, are again a false vessel of who they are, which the more they create it, the more they have to have it validated, the less real it becomes, the more detached from reality the real them feels. So this, I know this is a thing because I've done it with young people that I know, the young men that I know who are part of the gay constituency. And it doesn't take long to burst it. That's the interesting thing. I can get them in about 40 minutes now. And then once, as somebody I think said in the chat earlier, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. But it's a confluence of events that has brought together the most phenomenal clash in a situation that we were never, ever built for. And what it's meant is that we had a situation that is very strange in history, where when it came to one of the major technological cultural changes of our time, the kids knew more than the adults. Yeah. Now, that's a very, very unusual situation. Very unusual. Now, that's one thing saying grandma can't program a video recorder is massively different from people to understand what the net is. And that's a much bigger thing than a video recorder, a much bigger thing. So we had a situation where children knew more than the parents did. And we've all been sideswiped. And there's a thing called Hanlon's razor, which I think is worth mentioning, which is never put down to wickedness, that which you can ascribe to stupidity. And I think what we have is an awful lot of stupidity currently, which ties back into what Brandon was saying about where did it come from. If you look at what the UNESCO sustainable goals are and how that is supposed to be implemented, there is a teaching theory in there, which is directly related to the removal of critical thinking skills from children and from young adults in university. And that was designed by the second in command of the Communist Party in Britain. Yeah. This is a cultural revolution. Now, what we saw in so now I'm very lucky, on my Warrior Teacher program, I've got people from the Ukraine who knew about Ceausescu. I've got people whose family were affected by the Holodomor, in Russia under Stalin, and I've got people whose family were affected by Adolf Hitler and the regime from the 1930s. And they can see this, and they don't understand why we can't. That's the thing. Now, that sounds hyperbolic, tin hat, away you go stuff, right? But it doesn't make it any less of a fact that a lot of the utterances and a lot of the movement that we're seeing towards tribal equity, which is this idea of flattening everything, and that's including the human experience. It's not just about resources. That's including the human experience. We're flattening out sex, right? So that it doesn't exist as a concept of male and female. They want to flatten everything. This is the same thinking, the same utterances that led to the horrors that we've seen in the 20th century. And it's being perpetrated by a group of people who should know better. That's probably, I would say, the pissed off Trotskyists and pissed off Marxists from the 1960s in San Francisco, because their utopia never came to be, and a generation of people who think nothing exists prior to 1985. That's the issue. When I was with a young person the other day and I asked them what they thought of the Holodomor, they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
It's just extraordinary. Yeah. So I spend all my time stalking young men and encouraging them to come to my flat under the premise of dinner, and they then have to sit for an hour and listen to me rattle on about this stuff while I try to change their minds. And it works inevitably. Once they get it, they get it. But this indoctrination is ephemeral, right? Within those types of people, it's quite ephemeral. The problem we've got is the dyed-in-the-wool adherents, not the acolytes, not the adherents, who are working, as Alix has already stated, within the corporate arena, within the public sector, within the private sector, and in many cases in the UK, breaching the public sector equality duty, when we have a government that seems absolutely remiss in enforcing any kind of lawful behaviour, because they don't want to be seen to be the bad guy, because this is the same as being gay. That's the big issue, is that they've managed to convince people that that's what it is. It's the same as being gay. It's not the same as being, it's got nothing to do with it. And everything is a vehicle to this idea that heteronormativity is a bad thing, that this specific way of living is bad, that being a male or a female is bad. Well, that's pure cultural Maoism mixed up with something else called Lysenkoism, which was about eugenics, and Cartesian dualism, which is the idea of a gendered soul that fills a flesh sack and that God occasionally gets wrong. I mean, if they're born in the wrong bloody body, where's the other one? It's just
where's the right one?
Well, and this,
somewhere gently moaning in a corner.
Well, and I look at, the underlying value system that we're seeing, this underlying value system is one of total dissociation, cognitive dissonance, objectification, commodification. Yeah, I mean, but we have to raise up the opposite values. If we're looking at a culture of objectification, commodification, hypersexualization, dissociation, we have to instill the values of our own embodiment, of our sense perceptions, of our physical reality, of our instincts, of our intuitions,
of the enlightenment.
Of the things. Yeah.
In the scientific process and reality. Somebody's just asked actually in the chat what makes it cultural Marxism. Cultural Maoism. Well, if you look at the history of what happened in the cultural revolution, the shaming of adults by children, the call to listen to children because they know better, the advent of lived experience. It's got all the hallmarks. It won't play out the same way because we live in a different time, but it's got all the hallmarks.
Yeah. No, it's totally. It's totally about, and I wanted to tag on, that was really interesting to listen to, Barry, but I wanted to tag on to Amy's earlier point too, about how the grooming about predators aren't just after one target, and they work to sort of condition the whole of society in order to make everyone lend credence to their, fetishistic demands and their proclivities. Just as a case in point of that, last year, the Washington Post ran an op-ed from someone who claimed to be gender vague, whatever that means. She said, it was saying that she thinks why kink belongs at Pride and she wants her kids to see it. This is the paper of record in the United States. This is one of the most important papers in the United States, giving space to the promotion of grooming of children. You cannot tell me that you're a marginalized community if you are openly advocating for kids to see kink at Pride, and she's doing it proudly and openly. I mean, if
I saw basically the same article in Fatherly magazine.
In what?
In Fatherly magazine, basically the same title that kids should be seeing kink at Pride in Fatherly magazine this year.
It was a reprint. Oh gosh.
You know, it's really interesting because I think a lot of people over the age of 35, and I'm sorry if I'm insulting anybody, don't really understand the world of young people. And one of the things that I've been kind of, talking about recently is how kind of groups and identities and cultures can merge in the most absolutely bizarre ways. And I just want to quickly just kind of talk about this for 1 second, is the Nazi bronies. Okay, so basically My Little Pony took hold on 4chan a couple of years ago, and there was all of these guys who were identifying as male My Little Ponies, bronies. And then that somehow merged with the online Nazis, and you had a whole bunch of Nazi bronies. Okay, so this is like one of the most purest examples of how this shit gets completely out of control. Okay, you have a whole bunch of people dressing up as My Little Pony in Nazi uniforms. Okay, like this is a real thing. This isn't like a joke, basically. And it's very funny, but it's also incredibly sad. And I always say to kind of people over the age of 35, understand like 4chan, understand Pornhub, and don't have it in your house. Block it if you can, because it is the absolute pits, basically.
My little Nazi. I just, do you know what I don't understand? We accept the fact that kids will go into school, kids will go to university, and they'll have a communist hat or a Che Guevara t-shirt. But if they did that with that, we never did ever get used to the idea that we haven't crystallized where the left goes too far. We haven't.
The hammer and sickle ought to be as offensive as the swastika.
Absolutely spot on. I don't get it. Killed 100 million people. I don't get it. No, it's on the other hand, when you consider that this long march has been going on for 60 years and that the entire edifice of the media has been controlled by the left and the liberals, is it any wonder? But I think we have to be careful, because we've got to remember at heart this is cultural. And we're going to end up in bed with some strange bedfellows if we're going to get this ended. So I think that's the important thing to remember.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I said I'm willing to talk to anyone. If people are like, oh, the Christian Post, blah, I'm like,
talk to anyone.
You see the most surprising people will talk to us. I'm like, the truth is true no matter who says it. So just talk. Like,
it's insane. It's insane. Yeah, but it's true that we have to make sure that the conversation needs to take place culturally, not politically. Because I'm not even convinced that our current political system can survive the first half of this century. I think we need a new way of doing things, especially when you consider that you can put a poll on Twitter and get more people to answer it than they would in a poll done by the government. I think it's extraordinary that we've got this democratizing force. I just don't think we've got used to it yet. And there's a wonderful film called Contact, starring Jodie Foster. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It's a wonderful movie, and she's asked in that question. They say to her, "What would you ask if you met the aliens in the film? If you met them, what would you ask? What would be your question that you would first ask them?" And she said, "I would ask them, how did you do it? How did you get through this technological adolescence and survive?" And that's straight from Carl Sagan. So I think these people who had the ability to see what was coming and to ask us very pertinent philosophical questions knew that we were going to have problems. But this is going to get worse before it gets better, and we need to start really producing a kind of what I call communities of practice, because if this is the way it is now and information is going to be thrown at us 24/7 in masses of amounts, we all become teachers and we all become students. It's the only way forward.
Absolutely. And also, I think it's really great to end on, to move on to Jeannette and Donna, but to end on kind of Barry's positive message that, sometimes, when you're talking about this total garbage, Nazi brodies and, the drag queen story, it's so ludicrous, you can get lost in the details. And that's why I kind of love Barry's outlook on it, because it's a pathway out of the bullshit. And even if it's only for yourself, right? Even if you only liberate yourself from the bullshit, right? That is enough. And then you'll go out and hopefully liberate other people from it. So I thought it's really important to kind of say, like, you know, we are positive about the future. We really think that we can get out of this. We can educate ourselves out of this. We can educate other people out of this. And it's a house of cards. You know, everything is going to come crashing down. And we're going to look back in 10 years, hopefully, and say, hey, remember that crazy time when there was drag queens in the library?
Can you imagine when archaeologists dig all this up? Just, what is this?
No.
There was a point when the entire Western world lost its mind. I'll give you something scary. Right? Let's give you something scary. Stonewall have moved into India. Can you imagine what's going to happen when they introduced it to a country like India with the history of the caste system they've got? Can you imagine? And their treatment of women.
Yeah.
You know?
Sati and the caste system.
Here we go. No, you know, it's incredibly worrying. And that's terrifying.
Which is
brutal. You know? And we'll be responsible if we don't stop it.
Yeah.
You know, people have got to take on a societal level responsibility here and
say,
look,
the gender surgery industry is it's taking off in India, from what I understand, and across parts of Asia.
Yeah, it's already started. But take heart, folks. Take heart. You know, they've never won.
I'll just kind of resist the temptation. I won't resist the temptation to tell you about the gender mapping project. So if you actually want to know in real time where the gender clinics are popping up, go to map.gendermapper.org and you can see all of them, right? So we don't need to talk about this in kind of ideas and ephemeral concepts. No, we can go to the cold hard facts. Let's take a look at the gender clinics. Let's see exactly where they are. And, you know, we have to bring this to light because it's so, them going into India, they're going in with the gender clinics. It's all going in together, right? Because it's a massive, big corporate cult, essentially.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have our guests give us a wrap up of their thoughts, and we're gonna go to the little woke end update with Jeannette and Donna. Brandon, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I need to make a phone call here soon, so I'll wrap it up now. But it's no, I thank for everyone who's watching. Thank you for engaging these issues because I think. Well, first of all, what could be more important than protecting our children? That's a very human thing. Whether you lean left or you lean right, this is the fight of our lives. And I could not have imagined engaging this kind of thing journalistically when I fell down the rabbit hole 6.5 years ago. But here we are. I'll just allow me to reinforce everyone's instincts that you were born with, that it's a very human thing to want to protect your young and contend for what is good and ethical. And I'm going to shamelessly self-promote that you do check out our Generation Indoctrination podcast series from the Christian Post. Amy's voice is the first you hear in the inaugural episode, and her insights were particularly good. I got comments saying that they especially liked her contributions. We are currently possibly looking into doing a second season, but that's not for sure yet, so I can't say for sure. But also do check out Dead Name because I think that humanizes the issue in a way that few projects have. I mean, there's some great independent films coming on the scene, sort of exploding all of this madness. But Dead Name is uniquely powerful because it shows just the family cost, the cost of how it ruptures family ties and parent-child bonds. These things are very primal. These things matter to us as human beings. So, yeah, but thank you all for having me, and it's good to join, and we're going to win.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon.
Hell yes. We are going to win. Thank you for allowing me to come along. It's been lovely, and it's nice to imagine that I'm talking to y'all in America there, and it's great to be able to have a voice across the pond, because my program that was developed for the winning mindset would never have got off the ground if it wasn't for Alix and a group of American mothers who've shown the most extraordinary courage in the face of awful adversity. So my thanks to them. And likewise, my understanding of a lot of this would never have got off the ground without the help of women in Britain, who have pointed me in the direction of the right information. And I would say to everybody to remember that the first and foremost lens you must see this through is one of safeguarding. Yep. That's the first lens. Now, I talk about queer theory and gender ideology, and that's the arena in which I play. But if you want to really get to grips with this, you must see it from a safeguarding perspective, because it is that will keep children safe. We do not set up priestly classes. We don't, because we know what happens when we do. And yet we seem to be doing it again to people who are untouchable. So I would say, from your perspective, if you really want to understand more, you'll find an awful lot on my YouTube channel, which is the EDI Jester, or the Court of the EDI Jester. You'll find lots of videos on there that you can watch. Sometimes I'm mad as a box of frogs, but you'll get used to it. And if you'd like to become a warrior teacher, then please do drop us a line. I've put the Substack article with the information in it in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to do this. I'm really honored to have been able to come along.
Well, thank you, Barry, and thank you, Brandon, and we will hear more from both of you. Bye. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I really appreciate you all in the chat. This has been a Saturday night, a live stream, and all of this is in support of Partners for Ethical Care and their event coming up on August 20th in Austin, Texas. It is bigger than Texas, exposing the gender industry in America. Come to Austin, Texas. You will learn how the gender industry manufactures trans kids and what you can do to ensure ethical care for children in America. Join us to put our differences aside and work together on this important issue. We invite you to come with curiosity and leave with courage. We are going to have some amazing speakers. Those speakers include the wonderful Miss Alix Aharon of the Gender Mapper Project, also a board member for Partners for Ethical Care, Miriam Grossman, MD, practicing physician, author. She has been in many different documentaries, including Lost in Translation. She has written a book, You Are Teaching My Child What? We also have the amazing Candace Jackson, formerly a lawyer with Wolf, now with a new law firm, Jackson and Bone. She has been instrumental in working on issues of Title IX, also protecting women in California, incarcerated women from being incarcerated with men. The amazing Jennifer Lal of the Center for Bioethics and Culture, Brandon Showalter of the Christian Post, myself, women's rights activist, educator, and facilitator. My work, of course, focuses on embodiment, boundaries, intuition, instincts, and sense perceptions as value systems to promote in opposition to this agenda. And lastly, but amazingly, Kay Yang of Stop Female Erasure and the Deprogrammer, recently featured on Glenn Beck and Fox News. Also, this will all be moderated by the amazing Isabella Malbin of the Whose Body Is It podcast, who is a life coach, former liberal turned feminist, and radical truth teller. So please join us for this event. Donate to help our cause. We are excited to see you all. We would love to see you join us in Texas. This is going to be a groundbreaking, trend-setting, newsworthy event, and we really hope to see you all there. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we will see you on February 4th for our next Saturday night live stream. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Howdy, folks. I've got two important messages for you. First, we'd love to see you in Austin on April 20th for our event, It's Bigger Than Texas, Exposing the Gender Industry in America. you'll get to hear from a phenomenal panel of experts. And you may get to see me ride a real horse in this ridiculous getup. In this crazy world of gender identity, it's hard to know which direction we're headed, or if we're even moving at all, or if we just look like cats working on a hairball. It's been a wild ride for the past few years, but it's time to scrape off our boots and get to work. We're all going to meet in Texas, and we want to see you there on April 20th. Get your ticket today. But before that, we need to raise some money to make this event happen, and we know that you can help us with that. Please enjoy our monthly entertainment and fundraising event called the Saturday Night Livestream. You can expect to hear from engaging and intelligent speakers. Join in to ask questions, and we'll even make you laugh. To be clear, if you don't laugh, we're not providing refunds of your donation or free therapy for the suffering you've endured while listening to us. Join us for our series of hour-and-a-half-long variety shows, and we hope that our entertainment will inspire your generosity. And if it doesn't, we're going to give away all kinds of free tchotchkes from the PEC store until we raise enough money we need during this live stream. Listen, people, we have limited resources, which is why we can only afford a horse that costs $0.25 to ride. Enjoy this Saturday Night Live stream, cowgirls and cowboys. Let's ride!